Hello, everyone. I'm Dana Perino, along with Kimberly Guilfoyle, Juan Williams, Jesse Waters, and Greg Gutfeld. It's 5 o'clock in New York City, and this is The Five. Hollywood has been rocked by the Harvey Weinstein scandal this week, and now more accusations against the movie mogul. Actress Rose McGowan took to Twitter blasting Amazon head Jeff Bezos, tweeting, "I told the head of your studio that HW, Harvey Weinstein, raped me. Over and over, I said it. He said it hadn't been proven. I said I was the proof." Amazon studio chief Roy Price has since been suspended. Meanwhile, feminist Jane Fonda is speaking out about why she stayed silent about Weinstein.
About a year ago, and I'm ashamed that I didn't say anything right then.
Why didn't you? You're so bold.
I was not that bold because I guess it hadn't happened to me, and so I didn't feel it was my place.
What did you know?
One of the women who has spoken out, Rosanna Arquette, told me, and it came as a shock and a great disappointment. This male entitlement.
So, Kimberly, we've been talking about the story for about a week. I actually found Jane Fonda's response refreshingly honest. I think Hillary Clinton's was more contrived earlier in the week, basically saying, well, I and many others had no idea. But Jane Fonda was owning it, saying, I don't know why I didn't come forward. I probably should have. It wasn't my story to tell. And it's complicated.
Yeah, I think it was one of her better, public, interviews and appearances, to be quite honest. And I think maybe it can give people a pause and reflection to think about if there's something that they've seen or that they've experienced or someone has told them about, and coming forward and actually making a difference, ahead of time. But you could tell that she was being very genuine, very authentic. There was, a lot of, I guess, veracity is what it seemed like in terms of her story. And she was specific. And she even said, listen, it was Rosanna Arquette that came forward to tell me this, and kind of owning it, to say I should have done something. I could have done more, especially with her name and her clout and, her position in Hollywood.
It's not the first time she's picked the wrong side, let's be honest.
No.
All right, that's fair enough. How big a deal is this for Hollywood, Greg? We're 10 days into this story.
I think that there's a lot of scared people right now. Hollywood right now is a big old cat that's coughing up a fur ball. And they're trying. And if you just think Harvey's the only fur ball, I don't think so. And I think the positive, what we can get out of this is we no longer need to take any moral lecturing from these holier-than-thou celebrities who are telling us about climate change, about the environment, who lecture us on sexism in the workplace or racism when they have been living with this secret. We've talked about this before. There's no such thing as an open secret. If everybody knows about it, it's actually a secret that you're hiding. They tolerated this, and I don't know. I don't think I'll ever be able to take any moral advice from Meryl Streep again.
That might be kind of refreshing, right? If Hollywood backs off on the moral police. Oh my God.
Yeah, but it won't happen.
Dana's ignoring you.
Because they're a bunch of crusaders, so I don't expect that to stop. I don't really begrudge Jane Fonda. I'm not going to second-guess a woman. She didn't want to be the crusader against Weinstein and stand there alone, and all hell would rain down on her legally, politically, and PR-wise if she chose to do that. So a lot of women are now coming forward because other women are coming forward, and I think the more people that come forward, it's going to create a tidal wave, and hopefully you get justice at the end of that. But the cover-up, a lot of the times they say, is worse than the crime. All the board members at the Weinstein Company, apparently they had language in his contract that sexual assaults or misdemeanors, so to speak, were allowable, and there was some money that changed hands, and it wasn't a fireable offense.
Yes.
Right. So that goes to the point that there was knowledge previously of these actions, and that was written in there on purpose to protect them. The Amazon situation, completely corrupt. That guy, I'm sure, is not the only one that got word of this. And then NBC News, too. They have a lot of deals with the Weinstein Company through Bravo, through NBC Universal. So that raises a lot of questions about why they didn't go forward with the story. But Weinstein, he's not the only one guilty in Hollywood. He's just the only one that got caught.
Well, actually, Juan, it was interesting. Oliver Stone, he was first asked about this, and he defended Weinstein. Then, after being attacked for that, a few hours later, he put out a full statement in which he said, I've been traveling, I'm appalled, and commend the courage of the women who've stepped forward. But then Patricia Arquette, a former Playmate, accused Oliver Stone of harassment, and that's kind of explicit. We don't have to go into it here. But you could see that as the accusations start to fly, you can see why people don't say anything. because they end up in this position where they actually have to backtrack their words.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm not sure Jane Fonda fits into this because Jane Fonda said nothing happened to her, which she heard that somebody else said that something happened.
I'm talking about Oliver Stone.
Yeah, but in Oliver Stone's case, I think I see here it says Carrie Stevens, who was Playboy's Playmate of the Year in June of '97. So what you get is
Excuse me, yeah, I have that wrong on my
No, it wasn't your fault. They put Patricia Arquette is not a former Playmate.
No.
Oh, boy, that's a
But that
screw
would
up.
be interesting. But I could have that down below. But let's not blame anybody here for giving me this.
No, I'm trying to help you out, kid. So I'm just
It's not my fault.
Don't you know the difference?
Yeah. Anyway.
Oh, my God.
Anyway, so like this woman said.
She doesn't know about
Right.
that.
Anyway, so this woman says that Oliver Stone once grabbed her at a party, right? Was groping her. So you get in a situation then where Oliver Stone initially says, oh, well, gee, I didn't realize how many people had corroborated the New York Times story, which has since, I think, been enlarged on by the New Yorker story. But then he says, oh, at that point, he thinks it's reprehensible and terrible and all that.
Right.
But then you go to the story about the Amazon executive who is now on leave, this guy, Roy Price.
Yep.
And there's such an interesting story there because you have a woman who says she's a lesbian, and she says he gets in a cab and he's coming on to her and telling her all kinds of awful things. And then when she tells him that she's not only lesbian but married, he continues. And then when she complains about it, all that happens is he doesn't appear at her parties or any event that she's involved with. And just as an aside, her dad turns out to be Philip K. Dick, who is the famous author. Why are you laughing, Mr.
Because I just love it when you retell an entire story.
Well, I love it.
And I know the things that you find interesting in
Yes.
it. She's a lesbian. And her father's name was Philip Dick. It just seems amusing.
I actually like his writing. I think, I think science fiction is up your alley, too.
No. Didn't he do
Friday shows.
He did Man
Robot
in the
Stream
High
of
Castle.
Electric Sheep or something like that?
Right, Man in the High Castle, which is what she's starring in, his daughter, right?
Right.
But the point is that this bad behavior is so consistent, and as we saw in the Amazon case, the higher-ups don't do anything. They think they can cover it up. And we've seen this throughout industries. Let me say, it ain't special to Hollywood.
No, you're right. Can I ask a question about this? I think this, when somebody says they're going to sex addiction rehab, I always feel like that's a cop-out because this doesn't strike me as sex addiction. No. This strikes me as being a really gross creep. There are people that have genuine sex addiction. They spend hours in front of a computer and they ruin their careers.
Function.
Yeah, they can't function. He clearly can function.
Right.
He just knew he could get away with it. So I think that it's not a cop out. It's a way for him to pay a rich man's penance.
Trying to preempt it. So you would see this actually a lot in cases that I would handle if you had high profile defendants, especially ones that were well funded and well sourced. They would take their client and put them in a rehab, whether it was sex rehab, alcohol rehab, if it was like a DUI case or sexual assault. Completely two different things. He's trying to frame this as, I am not a sexual predator. I am someone who has a sex addiction problem. So therefore, I'm, less culpable, and it's like a built-in excuse. So they try and do that and persuade the judge.
Didn't he also say when the paparazzi were at his driveway, I made a mistake?
Second chances.
I mean, sexually assaulting
pick
women is not a mistake.
Yeah.
When you do it over and over and over again, it's not a mistake once.
Well, it's either it's a mistake or you have an addiction.
You're an addicted sexual
That's not an addiction.
misconduct.
It's not an addiction. But you are committing
No,
a
it's a
crime.
crime.
Yeah, you're a criminal.
It's a crime.
Yeah, but here's the addiction. No, there is an addiction. Because one of the things is Wade Boggs. Remember Wade Boggs?
Of course.
He went, the third baseman for the Red Sox, he said he went into sex treatment. I thought, what a joke this is. Mm-hmm. But in this case, men who are powerful and rich think, you know what, I can do what I want to do.
But that's not an addiction. That's just.
That's what I
Yeah,
think.
yeah.
But you know what? Men like sex, and here are all these starlets hanging around, right? Mm-hmm. And these guys think they can get away with it, and no one's going to call them on it because, as in the Weinstein situation, he has so many connections, so much power, and David Boies, who was the lawyer that negotiated his last contract, said explicitly in the contract, it said he had these problems with, I think there were four women. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, it's not a secret.
Yeah.
That's an interesting legal decision, right, Kimberly?
Yeah, it absolutely is. And we were touched on it earlier on your show. And the thing is, like, it just goes to show that these companies and his company had prior knowledge. They knew that was a problem. They went ahead and kept him in the employment, creating an unsafe environment for those that would come into contact with him. But they essentially were licensing criminal sexual conduct and saying that it was okay for you to do this as long as you pay us back. So they were more interested in a financial indemnification, but had no, moral qualms with it whatsoever.
Could you see a class action lawsuit arising from something like this because of the number of women?
Yes, and we talked about that earlier. Yeah, because the bottom line is you can have people then join together to bring a case like a civil suit, and in fact, even against the company to say, look, they acted in conscious disregard of this known risk, which created an unsafe environment for people. So there should be. And don't you think that a jury would be very persuaded by something like that? Because it's pretty compelling and pretty shocking.
You know what struck me in reading about all this week was the Ronan Farrow angle. Now, Ronan Farrow is the journalist for NBC. NBC doesn't take the story. He goes over to the New Yorker, and the same story then becomes so explosive this week. So then in people talking about why NBC executives didn't do this, they say, well, some of the executives say it wasn't quite the same story. But they also say Ronan Farrow, of course, the son of Mia Farrow, had been involved with his sister making allegations against Woody Allen. And I'm wondering if people think, this whole industry and all the connections, they just aren't sure. And also NBC, of course, were the ones who withheld, and then somebody leaked the tape on, guess who? President Trump and his vulgar attitude towards women.
Well, we'll see what the weekend brings, but maybe next week we won't be talking about this as much unless there's a lot more to say. We have more to come. President Trump's reached a decision on the Iran nuke deal. You're going to hear about that next.
Today, President Trump announced his long-awaited decision on the disastrous Iran nuke deal arranged by his predecessor.
The Iran deal was one of the worst and most one-sided transactions the United States has ever entered into. What is the purpose of a deal that, at best, only delays Iran's nuclear capability for a short period of time? This, as President of the United States, is unacceptable.
He says he won't recertify the accord because the country isn't living up to the, quote, spirit of the deal and has committed multiple violations.
We will not continue down a path whose predictable conclusion is more violence, more terror, and the very real threat of Iran's nuclear breakout. In the event we are not able to reach a solution working with Congress and our allies, then the agreement will be terminated. It is under continuous review, and our participation can be canceled by me as president at any time.
So if Congress doesn't come up with satisfactory changes, he is in fact prepared to terminate it. So, Dana, strong statement by the president, a lot of discussion leading up to this in terms of what the president would do and the involvement as well of Congress.
Right. So when the Congress passed the law, they said that the president, whoever the president is going to be, every 90 days has to decide if Iran is in compliance or not. When the president had done this already 2 times after he was sworn in, he said he did not want to do it again. He had ran on his campaign saying that the deal was one of the worst that the United States had ever signed on to. He was mad because he said that this technical compliance might be true in some cases, but that the spirit of the deal was not being lived up to. And that in particular talks about how Iran, for example, was mailing in its own soil samples. Mm-hmm. Okay, so like
I do that too.
Yeah, exactly. So that's obviously suspicious. And then I thought it was extremely bold. An additional step taken that I don't think people saw throughout the week until it was announced today is that he singled out the Iranian Revolutionary Guard as a terrorist organization. And I think that is actually the first time that's ever been done about another country's actual military, to call them a terrorist organization. It was extremely bold. But I also note that tonight, Iranian President Hassan Rouhani said that his country will continue to stick to the nuclear deal despite U.S. President Trump's accusation that they had violated the spirit of it and that it's much stronger than Trump believes. So I think, as Jesse and I were talking in the break, that Jesse's right, that Rouhani loves the deal because it was a better deal for Iran than it was for us.
Yeah, Jesse, so, this is something where Iran was like, listen, they were the beneficiary of what at least President Trump has said and his advisors believe was an unequal bargain in terms of this deal.
completely unequal. Can we get that $3 trillion in cash back? Can we get any of that money back?
I don't think so.
I mean,
you want to claw
what a waste of money. Yeah, we'd like to claw that back. It's a terrible deal. We're all safer, even Juan, as a result of President Trump's actions today. Even though he did kick it to Congress, which is a little risky if Congress can do something in 60 days. They have a lot on their plate. I'm not so confident. We'll see what happens. But like you said, the Revolutionary Guard, they're causing mayhem in Iraq. They're exporting terror through Hezbollah and through Hamas. Israel came out today extremely happy about this. The Saudis, extremely happy about this. All of our allies never thought this was a good deal. If you look at what happened with North Korea,
right.
Perfect example. We gave them lots of money. We gave them fuel. We helped them build reactors. And what did they do? They waited and waited and waited, and then they nuked up. And now we're under a nuclear umbrella. So that was a lesson. Trump took that lesson and is now looking at using it with the Iranians. So what do we do now? If we get out of the deal, are we safer? Everybody says, oh, no, we're not as safe if we get out. I think we're absolutely more safe. They're not even letting us inspect military sites.
Right.
How is that possible to violate? I mean, that is the key ingredient to having the deal, full, unfettered inspections. If that's not on the table and they're continuing to test their ballistic missile programs and chanting death to America, it's not a good deal.
Well, let's quote then the Defense Secretary, Mattis. He says, this deal serves the U.S. interest. How about the Secretary of State, Rex Tillerson? He says that, in fact, Iran has held up their end of the deal. And then so you come to options. Number one option, Congress does nothing, right? Okay. And, in fact, Jesse says that's the most likely outcome. Second, impose economic sanctions on Iran. That would kill the deal. Or third, open up new negotiations. But, of course, we're not offering anything in terms of new negotiations. We're not saying, oh, we'll give you this in exchange for that. So why would they negotiate? So we come to Rouhani, the president. Rouhani is the moderate in this situation in Iran. He wants a deal with the U.S. because he's trying to moderate a lot of the Iranian negative influence in the Middle East. It's the Ayatollah who is delighted that this deal is done, because the Ayatollah is now saying to all the other partners, and by the way, that includes Russia, China, Britain, France, who all like this deal and don't want to decertify, is saying to them, you can't trust the United States. They make deals and they break deals. You know what this is about? This is about Donald Trump not doing Obamacare, not being able to do tax reform, not doing a wall. And now he's saying to his base, oh, but I did this. This is terrible.
Oh, my goodness. Okay, that's like 12 segments that we'd have to cover right there. But I want to get Greg in, and this is the president being consistent in terms of his opinion about this deal to begin with. So it's a follow through on it. And today, specifically, he was addressing the Iranian people directly.
There's a moderate Iranian is they only execute half your family. So let's be this. What was the central problem with the Iran deal? That it was a treaty dressed up as legislation. So Obama cheated our Constitution, and he lied to get this thing through because he knew he couldn't get it passed. No one was going to pass this terrible, terrible deal. So this is the great story of this is how Trump is so far from being an autocrat. He's sending it back to Congress. He's saying, let's do the right thing. I'm not going to be like President Obama and dress this thing up as something else and try to trick the American public. I'm going to tell you what it is. And you guys, guess what? You guys get to go back and you guys get to work on it. Isn't that great? Why is that great? This is all about President Obama's desperate need for a foreign policy legacy. So he created this horrible deal and he shoved it through, and now we're shoving it back. And by the way, we're shoving it back in a constitutional manner.
No, you know what? So Congress will get this deal, Greg, and they ideally should do something to move us forward, to make us safer. And to the contrary, they will not, because Donald Trump has just said, oh, this is so sticky.
They're going to cut our mics.
Let the other guy have it.
Okay, well, coming up, jam-packed, right? Trump aims to dismantle Obamacare. Top Democrats are calling it sabotage. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
President Trump today defending his new executive order to stop payments to insurers under Obamacare.
You saw what we did yesterday with respect to health care. It's step by step by step. One by one, it's going to come down, and we're going to have great health care in our country.
Democratic leaders Pelosi and Schumer call it a spiteful act of vast, pointless sabotage leveled at working families and the middle class. GOP Senator Ted Cruz opposed his party's last Obamacare repeal attempt, but supports the president's move and blasts Democrats for their hypocrisy.
Why is it that Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer get really angry defending corporate welfare, defending billions in bailout for insurance companies, but they're not worried about the single mom who's had her hours forcibly reduced to 29 hours a week because of Obamacare? They're not worried about the working family whose premiums have skyrocketed. Average premiums have risen over $5,000 a year under Obamacare.
Greg, I can tell you miss listening to Ted Cruz.
I love his voice. By the way, this isn't crony capitalism. It's crony corporatism. Unconstitutional taxpayer-funded bribes to select insurance companies. It's interesting to see liberals now defending big business and Republicans targeting, crony corporatism and evil big business. The stereotypes are now reversed. Yeah. I find that quite refreshing. We'll be right back.
Juan, defend that, because they were getting hundreds of millions of dollars in payoffs because they were losing money on the unsuccessful Obamacare exchanges.
Let me just say, sometimes I don't know what to do. Today's Friday.
I noticed.
And I just want to scream. Because, the idea of the whole Obamacare, yes. It's so open. Reduce the number of people without insurance in America, right?
Right.
Republicans.
So the goal was to bring prices down.
No. Reduce. That was number one, was reduce the number of uninsured Americans, because it drives up all our costs, because when those people run off to the emergency room or whatever, we end up bearing the cost anyway. But anyway, let me just say, so this is the situation at the moment where you say, you know what, we're going to help the insurance companies with insurance for low income and moderate income people.
Then why did deductibles and premiums go up?
Oh, let me just say, because they all go up. There's a steady rising cost of health care in the country.
So it didn't work?
Let me just say, no, it did work, but because they would have gone up more, Greg.
That's an unprovable argument.
The promise was to bring them down.
No, okay.
You said every family was going to save $1,500.
So what you're going to do here is you have Blue Cross Blue Shield, you have the American Health Insurers Association, you have pretty much everybody in the business saying this is destabilizing, and President Trump is now putting the most vulnerable in our society in terms of health care at risk.
Insurance companies?
I find it loathsome. I just can't believe he did this.
Do you find it loathsome?
Well, I actually think it's consistent with the law, because the House of Representatives, the Republicans, challenged the Obamacare's payments to these insurance companies in court. A federal court in February said, actually, the House Republicans are correct. And so this is actually President Trump fulfilling the law, which, again, he's not an autocrat.
There you go, ladies and gentlemen.
Trump defending the Constitution, Kimberly Guilfoyle.
Yeah, well,
this is legal.
There you go. Very legal. Not barely legal, very legal. So here's the problem for the Democrats. This is going to be very popular with the marketplace, with the Americans, with the hardworking men and women that want to see this kind of competition. It's going to be better value for them. So by the time the Democrats are done whining about it and also pushing it through the court system, many of these changes are going to be pretty much irrevocable. So I think that it's going to be a very positive move for President Trump. And also, you see, he was able to get widespread support from, Republicans that sometimes have been critical of him, like Ted Cruz and, Rand Paul. And so this, I think, was something, when I think about it in, reflection and contemplate it, I say, why didn't he do it sooner?
And if Democrats are unhappy with it, why don't they come to the negotiating table and start wheeling and dealing with the president?
But they
wanted to pass a bill.
They did want to do that.
Actually, if he had done it, they could have probably.
No, but I'm saying, you guys, 7 years, Republicans have done nothing. They haven't come up with a better plan. They can't pass it. And this is
I agree with that. I agree that Republicans can't pass it.
It's hard to take away the candy once it's given out.
That's right. It's a Santa Claus.
Facebook Friday's coming up.
Next up, an NFL player willing to give up his job if he's forced to stand for the national anthem.
Oh my
God. Just when you thought the NFL protests were dying down, one wide receiver may take his protest one step farther. Tennessee Titans player Rashad Matthews tweets he would step away from the league, in other words, quit, if it implemented a new rule requiring players to stand for the national anthem. So the owners are expected to discuss this issue next week. What do you think?
If he wants to give up the job he loves for his principles, that's fine. Yep. Let him do it. It doesn't matter to me. You know, I don't know how great of an asset he is to the team. I don't really know how many balls he's caught this season so far, but I don't think his teammates would want him to bail out for something like that. I mean, this is still a team sport, and if you're going to leave on something as small as, you know, your right to take a knee, I bet the rest of the team might be a little upset about it. Maybe not the second-string wide receiver who'd come up and take your slot. Probably everybody else.
Kimberly, the NFL said that they will not mandate that the players stand.
Okay, well, I mean, really, what is this guy trying to do? You know, just invite, you know, bad luck into his life and to his front doorstep? I mean, it's just ridiculous. You know, he's got a great opportunity to play a game that, you know, people love and do something to be able to provide for his family. It's just not smart. You know, like just when the baseball players, like when the whole strike, that didn't work out well for him. And ultimately, he's hurting the other players on his team, too, by doing that.
Mm-hmm. So now we have a situation, Dana, where there's a sheriff who says he's boycotting Ford because Ford put out a statement saying, you know, players have the right to express their, you know, upset with the way that cops deal with black people.
Isn't it great in America? You can have all this freedom to say or do whatever you want. So
No.
they can boycott. They can say what they want to about the players. I mean, that's actually what it's about. I really thought that Condoleezza Rice earlier this week answered it very well. And I think if these players heard her, they might change their mind. And she said that you stand in unison and respect, not because the nation is perfect, but because it is imperfect, and that there's still work to do. Mm-hmm. And he also is going to be giving $75,000 to local communities to deal with this issue. So he's got a great platform. I hope that he wouldn't quit and maybe decide to stand to try to make the country better and also to put his money where his mouth is.
You know what I thought was impressive about Condoleezza Rice's statement, and of course the reason I thought it was impressive is because I agree with it, is that what she said, as I heard it, was, if you are trying to persuade other people, you don't allow them to divert the conversation. Mm-hmm. And what has happened is now you have, and unfortunately to my mind, it's become a black-white issue, and you can see this in the polling, where people say, oh, this is about the flag, the anthem, or the military. And the players say, no, my mom was in the military, my dad's in the military, et cetera. It has nothing to do with that. This is about police brutality.
Gee, I wonder who said that about 3 times in the last month, that if only the protest was made clear, people would understand it. But that's the problem. Right. It wasn't clear. Look, years from now, we're going to look back at this and see how irrational this country became due to identity politics, where identity politics infects. It becomes a game of chicken between sides because one side gets offended by the other, and then it just keeps going. You're seeing this on campuses now where people are shouting down people. It's a game of chicken. So let's take it to the ultimate. Why don't we just speed to the end? I have an idea for the biggest football game ever that will get the biggest game ever. Settle it once and for all. Kneelers versus the standers. You get the best kneelers, you get the best standards, and they play the game. You turn the game into an actual political battle. Settle it once and for all.
Wow, the standards are going to win, especially if Kaepernick is the quarterback for the kneelers.
Why not kneelers versus standards?
Let me put a bet on that game.
What person could put this together? Where is Don King? He could
Don King, yeah. Bob Arum, let's put it together. But you know, so apparently last night in Charlotte, you had people outside the stadium taking a knee during the anthem to, again, express their concern about this issue. Now, your point to me is, oh, gee, this really is a waste of time. I don't think it's a waste of time.
I never said that.
You don't think it's
No, I just said that a poor protest is when an overwhelming majority do not understand it.
Yeah,
but there's a lot.
Right.
But
do you think that this has just become like team sport politics where they are intentionally not understanding because they don't want to deal with the racial issue?
No. I will never respect a man who wears socks with
that seems like such a distraction.
No, he wore them on purpose, not as a distraction, but to get attention.
So this is
that was part of his protest.
That's the biggest issue at the table?
As cops are being targeted and executed,
yeah.
yes.
No. And by the way, play the game, be respectful. You're getting paid a lot of money to be there at the stadium, and if you feel so inclined, you would like to express yourself and engage in this type of social injustice protest, then why don't you do it on your own free time? time and actually do that and show that you're personally invested instead of while you're being paid to do something.
And the cameras didn't even show the national anthem at last night's football game because they know it's hurting the bottom line.
Are we done with this?
Yeah, you know, in fact, the NFL may have some resolution.
I mean, come on.
Greg, can you do the job that you're paid to do and participate in the segment?
This is why we only do one question on Facebook Friday.
Oh, no, I want to do Facebook Friday. Okay, don't move. Don't move a bone. Facebook Friday is up next.
It's a little upbeat music for Friday the 13th, Facebook edition. Okay. Mary Ellen F. What a great name. Ask this question, Kimberly. If you could come back on the next life, who would you like to be?
You're such a hater. I just said for the break, I'm like, hey, don't come to me first. And you're like, hey, Kimberly. Okay, I got an answer for you. Margaret Thatcher.
Oh, interesting.
Very good choice, right?
You should have said Juan Williams, so I would have come to you second.
So I'd be silent, screaming inside, right? The body.
You got it.
Trying
Guess
to
what?
claw my
You'd be
way
like,
out of my
oh
own
my
body.
I'm so confused.
Yeah.
Juan, if you could come
I
back.
really appreciate that. You have a sense of what I go through every day.
All right.
Thank you.
Counseling session.
Next life, Juan, what would you like to come back?
Well, so you mean you can't come back as Jesus, right? Because
I don't know.
It says you can.
You can if you want, but
You can.
that's you're shooting pretty
That's
high
kinda
there,
bold.
Cam.
you're shooting high.
You think you can do a better job?
You can't get a job. Yeah, because if you kneel during the anthem, they wouldn't say you were praying, right? So you'd be out of a job. I don't know. So what do you think? So who's having the most fun? Tom Brady, you once told me. Tom Brady's married to a beautiful woman, makes a lot of money. I think he's the most popular football player.
Well, I don't know. We went to the
He
same
eats
high school.
nothing.
That's all I know.
Yeah, his diet is.
You're not
I'm
going to like
into
that
it.
diet.
Yeah,
What do you mean? As long as they have ice cream, I'm okay.
No,
You
you
know,
can't.
I don't think they even have that. I couldn't live in the same
Jesse?
house with him. I gotta tell
I'd
you.
come back as my mother.
That is interesting and strange.
I would come back
Because that
as
means
my
you would
mom.
sleep with your father.
Oh, man. You see what goes on here.
I'm just pointing out the obvious.
Right.
That is why I'm here on this show, to point out the obvious.
That is so
Wow.
gross.
Going for
Wow.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Say David Schwimmer.
I'm going to go swimmer.
Oh, my gosh.
And then
think
somebody
you
go,
got-
you look like Jesse Waters.
I think you've had too
He's
much
using
cold
my name to
medicine.
get into
That's the
places.
problem, right?
Dana?
That's a good
I want to come back as Jasper.
Oh.
The best life.
Spoiled dog.
because you'd be his owner.
Yeah.
That is pretty strange. I would come back as Planet Earth.
That's not
And you'd
right.
all be all over me.
No,
Great.
that is
Now-
not a person.
No,
You
but now-
violated
It
it.
is.
Kimberly.
It is a collection of people.
It's
I
Mother
want to come
Earth.
back as Planet Earth.
No, but
I
Kimberly-
deserve it. I've been
Wait,
through a lot.
this answers Kimberly's question. Why is Greg so gaseous?
Because he has so many people inside his body?
Well,
Yeah.
he's Earth. He's Earth, yeah.
A lot of flora.
my God.
Chrissy K. Oh, this
on
is a
fire
great
today.
question.
What is going
I'll start
on?
with you, Dana, from Chrissy K. What was your first cartoon lunchbox as a kid?
Peanuts. Like it was a
Don't swear.
Charlie the Brown comic strip thing.
Yeah,
It was
yeah, yeah.
Yellow and it had a red handle.
That's
Also,
good.
there was Holly Hobby, but I don't know which was first.
Interesting.
Maybe
Very good.
Holly
What about
Hobby.
it? Tells you what era you were in. What was
Yeah.
yours?
Transformers, He-Man,
Oh,
something
God.
like that.
Yeah. You had a lunchbox smell. I hated. Jess, I just hated
You like
it.
the smell of it.
the
Well, it
lunch-
Oh, I
What's
love
in
my
the lunchbox?
thermos.
What kind
Yeah.
did
Your
you
mom can
have?
cook.
Why didn't you just, rinse
I
it,
had the
wash
brown bag with the grease spot.
it? Yeah.
Yeah. Juan?
I think it was like a New York Mets
Sports.
box.
Yeah, I'm sorry to hear that one.
Let me tell you, I got a lot to be sorry about in the baseball front.
What about
Yeah.
KG?
Totally. So mine was Pele. I loved my Pele,
Pele.
lunchbox. Am
Wow.
I dating myself right now?
No.
Oh, okay. But I loved it. I loved to play soccer, and I played on an all-boys team, which is perfect for me.
You were a trailblazer.
Yes.
My lunchbox was the firing line. Interesting. Anyway.
You mean Bill Buckley?
Yes. You didn't know the firing line had a lunchbox?
No.
Interesting.
You were a special premium subscriber.
Came with a pipe.
I think you're making this up.
Yeah, so much
Kathy
for
J.
Berkeley.
Kind of a similar question. I'll go to you, Jesse. What toy from your childhood do you remember fondly, or do you still have? That's interesting.
Well, my mother threw out my Nintendo. I'm still bummed out about that. She also threw out all my Star Wars toys, those things you
Yes.
put together, and those are probably worth a lot of money, so
Yeah.
I'm not happy about that either.
When did you throw them out? Like last week? Or...
What about you, Kimberly?
Well, let's see. So no, I have in television.
You know,
It's like
television.
Nintendo, but it was like in television. Anyway, but no, I wasn't upset about it. I used to play with my brother, and then my dad made us give it away to some other children that had lost their mom. So we gave it to them.
That was
a good
nice.
So
Juan,
that was a good
That was
memory.
very
Juan, toy from your childhood?
You know, I was just thinking silly putty. You know what silly putty is?
Love that.
Isn't that cool?
Love that.
Yeah, I really did. And the funny thing is, I don't even know if it's around now.
I think it
Oh, it's
still
around.
is.
Oh,
It
is it?
still is. Tastes weird. Not as delicious as Play-Doh. Kids, don't eat Play-Doh. You'll end up like me. Dana?
I had a Sesame Street, it was like a house, and you could open it up.
Yes.
And then you could put the little figurines inside all the different.
You used to run around in there.
Oh.
I did.
Yes, you did. Favorite toy?
Glass houses.
My favorite toy?
Glass houses.
Stick. Loved a good stick.
Nice stick. No
Just a nice
slinky.
stick. Yeah. And you know,
You didn't have a boomerang?
no, a stick is the original boomerang. It really is. Throw a stick, it doesn't come back. Who cares? You find another stick. You don't need the stick to come back. There's sticks everywhere.
No.
No carbon
You must have
footprint.
had a great childhood.
Wow.
I did. I had a wonderful childhood. Lots of sticks. All right. What Disney villain would you like to be? Juan from Sherry S.
A Disney villain?
Yes.
I have to think here. So, who's a Disney villain?
Say Snow
Cruella
White.
DeVille.
Cruella DeVille. I think she's pretty
Right,
cool.
but Snow White was not a villain.
It was a joke
I don't know. I can't.
because we keep already talking about race.
Do we have to be a villain?
Yeah. No. Well, that's the question. I can't change the question. They're wrapping me up. It's 5:51.
All right, fine.
We'll answer
All right.
next
Sorry,
week.
kids. One more thing. Up next.